we're going to be going through a lot of difficulties. But if you're facing the wind, you're growing. That's what life is about.
We need to give all the help we can give to these ecosystems. The forces that are acting against, they're nonstop and they're not going to stop.
How do we work through difficult times? And that's uniting, bringing the best out in people.
If you looked up and all the trees were gone off the hillsides, you would notice.
If you don't take a risk and put the effort into trying for restoration efforts, nothing's going to happen.
If enough people are working in this field, we can be a huge positive force.
Our community won't have to go kilometers away to find something that was always at our back door.
We've reached that point where we need to take action.
How can I show up and use my strengths to help develop a more resilient world?
Sweetgrass, which is known to us as sipatsumo, is part of our way of life. It's part of our ceremonies. It's medicines, but it's also our tie to Mother Earth. It's always been a big part of our lives. As you go back in time, it's always been there. It's a part of who we are.
We predominantly use sweetgrass in our ceremonies and our incense. And so the smell of the sweetgrass always associates our people with our culture or spirituality, or there's somebody smudging, or they're blessing the house. When you smell it, you know there's that connection.
In the last 10 years, we're seeing a lot of changes in the landscape. When we look at the droughts that we've been experiencing, that abundance isn't there anymore. Weather patterns have changed. The rain season is not there anymore. We have tributaries that come through the nation, right? And they've dried up. We're learning to adapt in addressing this issue of climate change. Then there's the Old Man River Dam. It's been there for almost 50 years. And so we saw where it started doing changes in the river. It became a controlled river.
The river is pretty much straightened out through the valley. You see these big oxbows that were there for thousands of years, that were established by Mother Nature. They're all but dried up now. This ecosystem provided for us for hundreds, if not thousands of years, for all aspects of our survival, our daily livelihood. More importantly, our cultural and spirituality. It has really created harsh conditions for species like sweetgrass.
Okay, and then we'll just
The Piikani people, they've always been resilient. They've always learned to adapt. Through our traditions, everything that we do comes from the earth. It's about taking and giving back. And so in order to give back, we have to find a way to help rejuvenate what's down in our river valley.
Sweetgrass has been important for healthy landscapes. It's important culturally. And we also now have the scientific evidence that it can sequester carbon. How do you connect the future with this wealth of knowledge that elders are holding? Our approach at the Resilience Institute is about uniting people, developing strategies that bring different ways of knowing together.
This is where the fire begins, all our ceremonies. And this is part of our heritage. So we never forget where we came from.
You're going to be the ones that are going to carry that in the future. So today what we're doing is a transfer ceremony.
You are now in charge of that growth. Hey, very proud of you guys.
Blackwood word for sweetgrass is si, ba, si, mo. Sapatsimo. What do we use sapatsimo for? Smudging. For smudging, eh?
Jokska, natuka, jokska.
When we pray, we're thinking about what we're praying for. And what are we praying for today? Our sweetgrass. Exactly. Okay? And how special to us as Blackfoot Piikani people is sweetgrass?
One of the areas that we wanted to focus on was with the schools, with the youth, creating a base for them and creating programs and teachings. They're the ones that are going to take that forward.
I get so much encouragement when I see people acting compassionately and with love and with care. And I think that if people work together that way, bringing the best of what they have to offer, then together they're stronger. That gives me hope.
We talk about Piikani Sini, so that's who we are as a people, how we are traditional, how we are resilient, how we faced our challenges. And we always remember that when we're going forward. No matter what the challenge is, that peace is always there. It's a tribute to our ancestors, but it's also something going forward for our youth.
A lot of people's only interaction with kelp is when it's washed up on the beach, and it can be smelly and it can be off-putting. And when you get in the water with kelp, it's this whole different story where there's like light filtering through the blades. It's almost like you're flying through a forest if you snorkel and dip down a little bit. And the colors are like nothing I've ever seen. I just wish more people knew what that was like and how beautiful kelp can be. In the small town that I grew up in on the coast, kelp was just a major component of the town and the ecosystem and the culture around there. I never thought it was something that could just not be there someday.
It's sort of easy to forget how much kelp is gone from this area. The whole Northern Strait was once abundant with kelp. You know, it was like a nuisance. It was a hazard to navigation. It's largely disappeared from this area. You know, if you looked up and all the trees were gone off the hillsides, you would notice.
Kelp is a very cold weather species. There's certain temperature points where it just won't survive and grow. And these areas have been reaching temperatures routinely in the summer that get beyond the kelp's thermal limit.
As a diver, you see it steadily, like our reefs have rapidly changed without having kelp over the years. Enormous amounts of sedimentation, the calming effects from shoreline erosion, and just nursery habitat. You know, some of these hot issues on the BC coast right now, salmon, orcas. If you don't have kelp beds for juvenile salmon to grow up in, there's some major problems for all levels of restorations. From the smallest to the largest, all interties.
What we've been doing is bringing in kelp from the edges of this warm area, trying to find populations that are still hanging on, and we bring them all together to a very hot site and we grow them right next to each other. There are some individuals that can survive in warmer waters, and we're trying to identify those kelps and then use them and their offspring for outplanting, because we're really not going to see any success if the kelp we put out isn't resilient toward these warm temperatures.
These will run for a month, so they take an image every minute and a half from daylight down till dusk. A diver can only spend an hour at a time looking at these plots, but when you can watch urchin movement, what's happening with your experiments, it's pretty valuable data.
Kelp Rescue Initiative is an organization that merges two areas that can really benefit from each other but often aren't working closely together, and that is the practice of restoration and the development of methods and scientific experimentation and output.
Out here, there's sort of that slope comes down.
It kind of, it gets shallower.
Yeah, it's shallow. We're just following the contour of that. Yeah. We know every inch of the shoreline, surface and underwater. I mean, it takes time in an area to understand how currents move, what patterns there are. Local knowledge can never be replaced by a map. We dove all the world's oceans. I still love diving in BC, is one of my favorites. The most exciting part of the dive for me is being in the kelp beds, and my hope is we can actually regenerate some wild beds around our area.
If everyone says a problem is too big to face, I'm not going to do anything to address it, then nothing is going to get done. Whereas if enough people are working in this field, humans are a huge global force. Look at the impact that we can have on the planet by our numbers and by our ingenuity and by the structures we build. That same reason we can be a huge positive force.
If you're passionate about a project, just be involved with it. We have people in our projects involved at every different level. I mean, our kids are involved and they're excited about it, and they actually generate an enormous amount of data collection for us.
What's your superpower? What do you love to do? Whatever the thing is that you're good at and passionate about, that's the thing to offer.
It's really truly a privilege to be surrounded by wild environments, to work on a species that is so sensitive to these changes in the larger environment. It's a real challenge. What's really important about caribou is that they are an indicator of the health of an ecosystem. We're using caribou as a study species. We're really actually studying the entire environment and what's happening in that environment. There aren't very many caribou left in the southern portion of Jasper. These herds will disappear without some sort of intervention. Caribou populations across the country decline usually as a result of increased predation pressure through changing species assemblages directly. So we caused a situation that wasn't good for caribou. Conservation breeding is the last-ditch effort, really, to bring animals back to this environment. As we've seen declines in caribou populations and made the decision to move towards conservation breeding, there's a whole lot of pieces that have to come together to work to make conservation breeding successful.
We spent years bringing knowledge from everywhere, from Alaska to Finland and everywhere in between, to create that approach that is specific for Jasper. The breeding center is 65 hectares, about 95 soccer field. It's been designed to house between 100 and 120 caribou. You bring wild animals in captivity, you breed them over time, and then you release the offsprings, in our case yearlings, every year until you meet your recovery goal. It's a tool that we decided to use in Jasper because no other tools would have a chance to be successful.
Today we'll head down the Moline Road to some habitat that has been previously occupied. These are all the old sightings. We know that they've always liked this slope above Watchtower Trailhead right here. It's fairly rocky. There could be some good lichen patches in there. Caribou eat lichen all winter long in the wild. In captivity, they won't have the option to have that naturally in their captive environment. So we would really like to have as much lichen as possible to supplement the feed that these caribou will get in the winter. So this is what we're looking for. Generally, we, although want to see this in much higher abundances, but we're generally looking for this lichen or lichens that look very similar. We'll be working with a number of Indigenous partners to help us collect lichens sustainably and provide that to caribou in captivity. We're coming back to a variety of these sites in the Moline Valley to learn about sustainable lichen harvest from one of our Indigenous partners, and they'll be doing most of the lichen harvest outside of the park in their traditional territories, but we're learning about it here together in caribou habitat in the park.
I work with really passionate people, and I think there's a lot of exciting work that we're doing in the field, work that is, in my mind, making a difference. A good question to ask is, what do you care for? What's your passion? And I know it sounds a little bit cliche, I guess. Everyone's talking about, oh, follow your passion, but if you truly care about something, you'll find a way to make it work. Sometimes it might not be obvious, sometimes it's confusing, it could be a long road to get there, but really ask yourself what you care for, and I think it's going to lead you where you need to be.